The priest's voice settled over the church like something holy. If anyone here has reason why these two should not be joined in holy matrimony, speak now, or forever hold your peace. 500 people held their breath. Champagne was already chilling in the reception hall next door. The string quartet had already rehearsed the recessional 3 times that morning. The best man stood at the altar smiling at the bride like a man with no weight on his conscience at all. And then from the very back of that church, one voice broke the silence wide open. I got something to say. Every single head turned. She was black, small, and her clothes had seen better days. Her edges were rough from months, without a proper mirror. Her shoes were the kind that had been walked nearly to nothing. But her eyes were completely steady. Like a woman who had already decided before she ever walked through those doors that she was not leaving without being heard. She was moving down the aisle before the gasps finished echoing off the cathedral walls. Security started toward her from both sides. She kept walking. Past the flower arrangements. Past women in silk who pulled their clutches closer. Past men in tailored suits who had never once in their lives been in a room with a woman who looked like she did. She reached the front of that church, and she held up a small black recording device. Her hand didn't shake. My name is Dorothy Mae Campbell, she said. And before y'all do another thing, you need to hear this. Nobody moved. Not even security. Because there is something about a woman who has already lost everything that people can feel in the air. A stillness that isn't safe. A calm that isn't peace. It's the stillness of someone who has nothing left to protect and everything left to say. Before you hear what was on that recording, you need to understand who Dorothy was. You need to sit with her story for a minute. Because if you don't know what she carried into that church, you will never fully understand what it took to walk through those doors. And if this kind of story reaches you in your chest, hit that like button right now and subscribe. Because what's coming is going to move you. Dorothy Mae Campbell was 30 years old, and she had already lived 3 lifetimes. She grew up in Atlanta. Southwest Side. Her mama cleaned houses 6 days a week, and her daddy drove a delivery truck until his back gave out. They weren't rich. But they were hers and she was theirs, and that was its own kind of wealth. When they passed, 3 years apart, cancer taking her mama first and then her daddy following behind like he never quite knew how to exist in a world without her, they left Dorothy the only thing they had been able to accumulate after a lifetime of working. A small savings account. A car that was paid off. A piece of land in her daddy's name that had been in the family for 40 years. Not much. But it was everything they had. And they left it all to her. She was 22 when she met Deshaun Campbell. Deshaun was fine, and he was funny, and when he talked about his future, he talked about it like it was already happening. He wanted to build a logistics business. He had the drive, Lord did he have the drive, but he didn't have the degree and he didn't have the capital. Dorothy had both. She loved him, so the decision didn't feel like a sacrifice. It felt like faith. She paid for his degree. She told herself she'd go to university the year after. That year never came. When Deshaun graduated, he needed money to register the company. Dorothy sold the car. Then she took out the savings. Then, because Deshaun said they were this close, just needed a little more to lock in their first contract, she sold the land. The 40-year-old family land. Gone. She gave him every single cent her parents had worked their whole lives to leave her. They got married the same month the company started turning a profit. They had a daughter. Dorothy named her Lily because her mama always kept lilies on the kitchen table even when they couldn't afford much else. Lily was 11 months old the first time Dorothy noticed something was different about Deshaun. The way he held his phone. The way he got quiet when she walked into a room. She told herself she was imagining it. She was tired. She was a new mama working part-time and doing the books for the company because they couldn't afford to hire anyone yet. She wasn't imagining it. Deshaun had been sleeping with his secretary, a white woman named Kristen who had started working for the company 6 months after Dorothy's money got the doors open. When Dorothy found out, she didn't scream. She sat in her kitchen for a long time and felt something move through her that didn't have a name. Then she asked him to leave. He didn't leave. He stayed and he got lawyers. His family came from everywhere, aunts and uncles and cousins who had never once shown up during the years Dorothy was selling her parents' inheritance to fund his dream, and they circled around Deshawn like a wall. The attorneys they hired were the kind Dorothy had never been in the same room with. They moved through the courts like people who knew the building. They filed motions she didn't understand in time to respond to properly. They presented a version of her life that she barely recognized, and the judge seemed to accept it without question. Full custody went to Deshawn. Dorothy stood in that courtroom and felt something leave her body that has never come back. Lily was 1 year old. Dorothy held her for the last time in the courthouse parking lot with Deshawn's attorney standing 15 feet away watching. She pressed her face into Lily's neck and breathed her in. Lily grabbed Dorothy's earring the way she always did, stubby little fingers curling around it, and Dorothy closed her eyes and made herself memorize the weight of her. Then she handed her over. She appealed twice. Spent money she borrowed from church members and old coworkers. The second appeal was denied, and after that there was no more money to borrow and no more doors that would open. What the system does to a black woman with no resources trying to fight a man who now has them is not complicated. It is simply a wall. A very tall, very expensive, very quiet wall. Dorothy lost the apartment 2 months after the second appeal. She moved to a shelter. Then between shelters. Then wherever she could find that was dry and safe. She kept a photograph of Lily in the inside pocket of her jacket. Lily at 11 months, fat little fist raised, laughing at something off to the side of the frame. She looked at it every single night. That was her life when the Horizon Foundation saved it. She didn't know it was going to happen. That's the thing about grace. You don't see it coming. It was a Tuesday morning at the free community health clinic on the east side. Dorothy had been trying to get a prescription refilled for 3 weeks, but kept getting turned away because her paperwork was incomplete. She didn't have a permanent address to put on the forms. She didn't have ID that wasn't expired. Every time she came back with one piece of the puzzle, they told her she needed another piece she didn't have. She was sitting on the floor in the hallway outside the clinic office, back against the wall, when a woman came out carrying a clipboard. The woman was maybe 60, gray hair pulled back, the kind of tired eyes that belong to people who work in places where there's never enough of anything. Dorothy Campbell? Dorothy looked up. I'm Susan. I coordinate the emergency medical fund here. She sat down on the floor next to Dorothy. Not in a chair. On the floor. I heard you've been trying to get your prescription sorted for a few weeks. Dorothy nodded. The medication you need, the generic version, it's about $300 without insurance. Dorothy's stomach dropped. She had $17. Susan was still talking. We have an emergency grant fund through the Horizon Foundation. It covers exactly this kind of situation. Medical necessity, financial hardship, no questions asked beyond the basic intake form. She held out the clipboard. If you fill this out, I can process it today. Prescription will be ready by this afternoon. Dorothy stared at the clipboard. What's the catch? No catch. Just need your name and the basics. No address required. No ID required. Just you. Dorothy took the clipboard with hands that were shaking slightly. She filled it out. Handed it back. For hours later, she walked out of that clinic with a full prescription bottle and paperwork for a follow-up appointment that was already scheduled and paid for. She sat on the bus stop bench outside and cried for 20 minutes straight. Not sad crying. Something else. The crying that happens when you've been holding your breath for so long you forgot what it felt like to breathe, and then suddenly the air comes back. She looked at the paperwork in her hand. At the top, in small print, funded by the Horizon Foundation. That night, Dorothy looked up the Horizon Foundation on a library computer. She read about the emergency medical grants, the housing assistance, the legal aid consultations. She read about Marcus Whitfield, the founder. White man, mid-40s, cell-made logistics empire. She watched a podcast clip where he talked about why he started the foundation. My mother died because she couldn't afford the follow-up treatment after her surgery, he said in the video. His voice was steady, but there was something underneath it. She had insurance. It just wasn't enough. And I watched her make the choice between paying for medication and paying rent, and she chose rent because she didn't want to be a burden. I built the Horizon Foundation so nobody else's mother has to make that choice. Dorothy watched that clip 3 times. She watched interviews where he talked about poverty and systemic barriers and the way people fall through cracks that shouldn't exist. She watched him on a local news segment at a community center, not performing, just talking to people, listening more than he spoke. She had never met Marcus Whitfield, but she knew what he had done for her, what his foundation had done. And she knew, the way you know things in your bones, that he was one of the rare ones. The people who actually meant it. A few weeks later, Dorothy was in a corner store buying a bottle of water when she saw the magazine on the rack. One of those glossy lifestyle magazines. The headline read, "Power Couple, Marcus Whitfield and Nicole Breslin set to wed in cathedral ceremony." There was a photo. Marcus in a suit, smiling. Nicole beside him, blonde, perfect, her hand on his arm. The kind of woman who looked like she belonged in those magazines. Dorothy picked it up and skimmed the article. The wedding was scheduled for Saturday, June 15th, at St. Benedict's Cathedral downtown. The article called it the social event of the season. It talked about Nicole's career in finance, her charity work, how she and Marcus had met at a gala and connected over their shared commitment to philanthropy. Dorothy put the magazine back. She was happy for him, in the distant way you can be happy for someone you don't know but who saved your life anyway. She thought about the prescription bottle that had kept her alive these past weeks. About Susan sitting on that clinic floor next to her. She thought about Lily. About the grant fund for legal consultations that she'd been trying to save up enough to access. She thought about what it would mean if something happened to the Horizon Foundation. If it stopped existing. If the emergency fund dried up. How many people like her would be sitting in clinic hallways with no way forward? She thought about that more than she expected to in the days after. And then, purely by accident, she ended up sleeping in the same cathedral where his wedding was being planned. She thought about it even more after the night she heard the voices in St. Benedict's Cathedral. She had found her way into the cathedral storage alcove the same way she found most shelter, by watching and waiting and learning the patterns. The side entrance near the flower deliveries stayed unlocked until midnight during event setup weeks. She'd clocked it over 2 nights before she used it. She was not looking for anything except somewhere dry to sleep. She heard them after 11. A woman's voice first. Then a man's. They were in the vestibule off the main hall with the door pulled nearly shut, but nearly isn't all the way, and stone walls in old cathedrals carry sound like it's their job. Dorothy did not move. Did not breathe loud. Just listen the way you learn to listen when listening has kept you safe. What she heard over the next several minutes arranged itself in her mind like a picture she wished she wasn't seeing. The woman's voice came first, polished and precise. The spousal property clause activates automatically the moment we sign the marriage certificate. His attorneys built it into his estate plan years ago after his mother died. He wanted to make sure his future wife would be protected immediately if anything happened to him. "How much access does that give you?" the man asked. "Initial? About 40% of liquid assets transfer to joint ownership. But that's just the beginning." She paused. "The real prize is the power of attorney document. And he'll just sign that?" The woman laughed, cold and calculated. "I'll present it during the honeymoon. Tell him it's standard paperwork for married couples. Insurance forms, beneficiary updates, routine administrative documents. I'll bury the power of attorney in the middle of the stack. He won't read it carefully. He trusts me. What does it actually give you? Complete signing authority over all business accounts, foundation accounts, everything. I can move money, liquidate assets, restructure holdings. By the time he realizes what's happened, I'll have already redirected the funds offshore." Dorothy's hand tightened on the recorder. "What about the Horizon Foundation specifically?" the man asked. "That's the beautiful part," the woman said, and Dorothy could hear the smile in her voice. "The foundation has reserve accounts with over $12 million. Grant money, donation pools, emergency funds. Once I have power of attorney over Marcus's estate, those accounts fall under the same umbrella because he's the primary trustee. His board thinks we're doing routine restructuring for tax efficiency. They have no idea what I'm actually setting up." 12 million, the man repeated. That's just the reserves. The foundation processes over 30 million annually. Once I have control, I can redirect allocations, delay grant distributions, move funds into shell accounts before anyone notices the pattern. There was a pause. Then the man's voice came again, softer now, intimate. How long do we have to keep this up? Through the honeymoon. Maybe 2 months after while the transfers process. Then we disappear. I've already set up the accounts in the Cayman Islands. No extradition treaty. And Marcus? What about him? Does it bother you at all? The woman was quiet for a moment. He's a good man. I'll give him that. But good men with money are easy targets, Andre. He wanted to believe in love again so badly after his mother died. I just gave him what he was looking for. Andre. The man's name was Andre. He thinks I'm his best friend, Andre said, and there was something in his voice that wasn't quite guilt, but wasn't quite pride either. You are his best friend, the woman said. That's what makes this perfect. He trusts you completely. He'd never believe you were involved even if someone told him. And tomorrow I'll be standing right next to him at that altar. Exactly where you need to be. The woman's voice softened into something almost tender. We've been planning this for 14 months, baby. We're almost there. There was movement. The sound of fabric, of two people embracing. I love you, Andre said. I know, the woman replied. And after this, we'll never have to pretend again. No more playing his devoted fiancé. No more you pretending to be his loyal friend. Just us and enough money to disappear anywhere we want. He actually thinks you're going to build a life with him. I know, she said again. And she laughed. Not a bitter laugh. Just amused. Like she was talking about someone foolish and far away. He keeps talking about starting a family. About the foundation work we'll do together. He has this whole future mapped out. While we're mapping our exit. Exactly. Dorothy reached into her jacket pocket before she'd consciously decided to. The recorder was there. She'd borrowed it from Robert, a semi-retired neighborhood journalist who kept his equipment in a duffel under his desk at the community center, where Dorothy sometimes picked up meal prep shifts. She'd borrowed it weeks ago trying to catch a social services officer she believed had falsified notes in her custody file. She hadn't been close enough for that. She was close enough now. She moved along the wall 1 inch at a time. The alcove to the vestibule was maybe 20 feet with a column in between that gave her cover if she stayed pressed against it. She moved in the dark with the patience of someone who understood that rushing was the only thing that could end this. She was 4 feet from the door gap when the woman's voice stopped mid-sentence. Dorothy froze. Every muscle locked. Did you hear something? The woman said. Silence. Dorothy didn't breathe. Didn't blink. She became part of the wall. The building settles, the man said. Old churches do that. A pause that lasted long enough for Dorothy's heartbeat to count every second of it. Then the woman continued. And Dorothy let out the breath so slowly it didn't make a sound, raised the recorder to the gap in the door, and pressed record. She got 14 minutes. She got the whole plan. The accounts. The honeymoon documents. The offshore structure. The name of the attorney who drafted the power transfer. She got the woman's voice walking through it all with the calm of someone who had thought about very little else for 14 months. And right near the end, almost carelessly, like it was the least interesting part of everything they were discussing, she got the man saying her name. Nicole. And Nicole saying his. Andre. She got Nicole saying, he's going to be at that altar looking at me like I'm everything he ever wanted. She got Andre saying, while I'm standing right next to him. She got both of them finding that funny. Dorothy moved back to her alcove in the dark and sat with the recorder against her chest and thought about the man whose foundation had saved her life. A man she'd never met but who had made sure people like her had somewhere to turn when the system closed every other door. She thought about Lily at 11 months, fist raised, laughing. She pressed the recorder against the photograph in her jacket pocket and closed her eyes. The morning of the wedding came silver and quiet. Dorothy cleaned herself in a gas station bathroom on the corner. She looked in that cracked mirror and had a conversation with herself that she had been having in various forms for 4 years. About being enough. About still being here. About how far a person can be knocked down and still find the floor with their feet. She walked to the cathedral with the recorder in her inside pocket. She went in with the last wave of guests before the doors were fully attendant managed. Slipped to the back. Stood against the wall. Watched Nicole walk down that aisle in white, performing love so well it looked real. Watched Andre stand next to Marcus with his hand clasped in front of him, smiling. Watched Marcus at the altar with his whole heart on his face. And when the priest reached the moment, Dorothy stood up. The rest moved fast. Security. The gasps. Her walking forward anyway. Making it to the front. Marcus staring at her. Her holding up the recorder. She played enough. Not all of it, not word for word, but enough. Nicole's voice planning her own husband's financial destruction. Andre's voice, Marcus's best man, right there at that altar, easy with the language of betrayal. Nicole admitting what those funds were for. The laughter. She played enough for the whole church to understand what they were witnessing. The room came apart in slow motion. 500 people moving in waves of shock. Photographers still shooting because their hands didn't know what else to do. Nicole's composure fracturing at the edges. Andre going very still in the way that people go still when they are calculating their next move. Marcus stood at that altar and did not move for a long moment. He listened to his own life being dismantled in a cathedral full of people, and whatever was happening inside him was happening too deep for his face to fully show it. Then he turned and walked out. Not dramatically. Just walked. The walk of a man who has gone somewhere inside himself where the performance of this day can no longer reach him. His security closed in behind him. The room erupted. 500 people all trying to process what they'd just heard. Photographers capturing everything. Andre frozen at the altar. The chaos was instant and complete. Dorothy stayed near the back, pressed against the wall, trying to disappear into the confusion. That's when Nicole moved. But she didn't go after Marcus. Not yet. She came for Dorothy. She crossed that cathedral floor in her wedding dress like a woman who had just lost everything and needed someone to blame. She was still beautiful, still composed in that way expensive white women know how to be even when everything is falling apart, but underneath it Dorothy could see the real thing now. Sharp-edged. Cold. Furious. Nicole stopped right in front of her. Close enough that Dorothy could smell her perfume. "You think you did something today," Nicole said. Her voice was low, controlled, meant only for Dorothy's ears. "You think you helped somebody. But let me tell you what you actually did. You just made the biggest mistake of your pathetic life." Dorothy said nothing. Just looked at her steady. "You are a nobody," Nicole continued, her green eyes blazing. "You are a homeless black woman who broke into a church and recorded a private conversation. That is illegal. By tomorrow morning, I will have you arrested. By tomorrow afternoon, I will make sure everyone knows you're mentally unstable, dangerous, a liar who fabricated evidence." "I didn't fabricate." "It won't matter," Nicole cut her off. "Nobody is going to believe you over me. Look at yourself. Look at me. Who do you think this world listens to?" Dorothy felt the weight of those words. The truth in them. "And Marcus," Nicole said, her voice dropping into something almost conversational, almost amused despite everything. "Marcus is going to forgive me. You don't know him. I do. He loves me. That is not something that goes away because of a recording. Men like Marcus, they want to believe in love. They want to be saved by it. He'll be angry for a few days, maybe a week. But he'll call me. And when he does, when we work this out, I will make sure that whatever crawled out of whatever gutter you came from gets put back in it permanently." She leaned in closer. "You have no idea who you just made an enemy of," she whispered. "But you're about to find out." Dorothy held her gaze. Didn't flinch. Didn't look away. Nicole waited for her to break. When she didn't, something flickered across Nicole's face. Uncertainty, maybe. Or just surprise that this woman wouldn't give her the satisfaction of fear. Then Nicole turned and walked away. Out the side doors. Across the courtyard. Going after what she'd really come for. Dorothy stayed where she was, heart pounding, hands shaking slightly. She hadn't recorded that. Hadn't thought to. Had just stood there and taken every word of it. She moved to the doorway and watched. Marcus was in the courtyard. His attorney on a phone nearby. Security forming a loose perimeter around him. And Nicole, gathering her dress, running across the stone courtyard in her heels, calling his name. Marcus, wait. Marcus, please. He stopped. Didn't turn around. Just stopped walking. Nicole reached him, her hand going to his arm. He pulled away. Marcus, you have to let me explain. Explain what? His voice was quiet. Flat. The kind of quiet that's more frightening than yelling. That recording, it was taken out of context. That woman, she's clearly disturbed. You saw her. You saw what she looked like. Did you sleep with Andre? The question landed like a stone in water. Nicole's mouth opened. Closed. Did you? Marcus turned to face her now. Did you sleep with my best friend? Marcus, that's not. Yes or no, Nicole. She hesitated. Just for a second. But it was enough. It's complicated, she said. Did Andre help you plan what was on that recording? Another hesitation. That same calculation moving across her face before she could stop it. The mask slipping. He saw it. He nodded slowly, like confirming something he already knew but had hoped wasn't true. I am not doing this here, he said. Marcus, you're being irrational right now. You're hurt, I understand that, but if you just calm down and think about everything we built together. Everything you built, he corrected. Apparently. That's not fair. What we have is real. You know it's real. You can't let one recording destroy 2 years. Did you love me? He asked. At any point, did you actually love me? Nicole opened her mouth. And for just a moment, Dorothy saw her consider lying. Saw her weigh whether she could still sell it. Whether one more performance might save this. Then something in Nicole's face changed. The softness dropped away entirely. The boardroom voice came back. Love, she said, and there was almost contempt in it now. Marcus, grow up. This is business. This has always been business. You just chose to make it romantic. There it was. The truth. Not hidden anymore. Marcus looked at her for a long moment. Then he turned to his attorney. Call my lawyers. All of them. I want every document she's touched reviewed by morning. He got in the car. The door closed. Nicole stood in that courtyard in her wedding dress and watched the car pull away. Dorothy turned away from the doorway. She had seen enough. She had done what she came to do. Marcus Whitfield knew the truth now. The Horizon Foundation was safe. She walked back into the cathedral to find her way out. And that is when she saw them. Deshawn was standing just inside the cathedral entrance. Gray suit, fresh fade, the particular ease of a man who has been comfortable long enough to forget it wasn't always that way. Kristen beside him, her hand through his arm, powder blue dress, the practiced smile of a woman who has won and knows it and lets it live on her face at all times. And beside Kristen, holding her hand, Lily, for years old. Her hair in 2 puffs, with little barrettes at the ends. She was wearing a yellow dress, and she was looking at Dorothy with the expression of a child who does not know what she is looking at, but senses that something important is happening. Dorothy could not breathe. She had imagined this moment 1,000 times in the dark. What Lily would look like. Whether she would have Dorothy's eyes or Deshawn's jaw. Whether she would know her. Whether some animal part of her would know her the way infants are supposed to know their mother's voice even before they're born. Lily just stared. Blank and curious the way 4-year-olds look at strangers. Dorothy took a step forward. Deshawn saw her. His face moved through surprise and then settled into something she recognized from the courtroom. That slow half-smile. The smile of a man who has won enough times in front of her that it has become a reflex. He leaned down and said something into Kristen's ear without taking his eyes off Dorothy. Kristen laughed. Short and certain. Her eyes moved across Dorothy the way you look at something beneath your consideration. Dorothy took another step toward Lily. Deshawn straightened up. He raised his hand and 2 security guards who were managing the entrance crowd were beside Dorothy before she had processed that he'd called them. She's bothering my family, Deshawn said. Calm as a man ordering food. Sir, I'm her mother. Dorothy's voice broke on the last word. Just on that one word. Ma'am, you need to step back. The guard's hand on her arm. That is my daughter. I just want to, her voice broke again. Lily. Baby, it's Mama. It's Mama, baby. Lily watched her with those eyes. Those wide, unrecognizing 4-year-old eyes. Not frightened. Not reaching. just watching. The blonkiest, most devastating thing Dorothy had ever seen in her life. Deshaun pulled Lily gently to his other side, away from Dorothy, and Lily let him without protest because he was Daddy, and that's just what Daddy did. Kristen was saying something to another woman nearby, laughing, her eyes sliding to Dorothy once with an expression that required no translation at all. The guards moved Dorothy back. Not roughly, just moved her. Through the entrance, down the steps, away from the doors. She didn't fight it. She had nothing left in her to fight with. She walked. Down the cathedral steps. Across the courtyard. Through the iron gate onto the sidewalk. She walked because walking was the only instruction her body still understood how to follow. The street was ordinary and unbothered the way streets always are when your world is ending. Cars passing. A man walking a dog. A food truck 2 blocks down. Everything continuing. Dorothy pressed her hand against her jacket pocket. Against the photograph she had not needed to take out in 4 years because she had it memorized. Every pixel. The fist raised. The laugh aimed at something off camera. She pressed her hand against it and kept walking, and let the tears come without trying to manage them, without performing for anyone, without anything left to hold back. She thought about her daddy's land. For generations of family, that land had held, and she had sold it for a dream that turned out not to be hers. She thought about standing in that courtroom. She thought about watching Marcus Whitfield talk about his mother on that podcast, about Susan sitting on the clinic floor next to her with a clipboard, about the prescription bottle that had kept her breathing. She thought about Lily's hand in Kristen's hand. The yellow dress. The barrettes. The eyes that didn't know her. She was 2 blocks from the cathedral when a car pulled up beside her. It moved slow, pacing her. She didn't look at it immediately, the way you learn not to look at slow-moving cars when you're a woman alone on a city street. But it didn't stop and it didn't speed up, and eventually she turned her head. Long black. The kind of quiet that only comes with serious money. The window was dark enough that she couldn't see anything inside. Not a face, not a shape, nothing. Just the car. Keeping pace with her steps. It stopped. Dorothy stopped. The car sat there beside her on that ordinary street with its dark window holding its silence, and whatever was on the other side of that glass wasn't showing itself yet. Dorothy looked at it and felt something strange move through her. Not fear. Something else. Something that had no name yet, but felt like the moment before a door opens. She stood there on that sidewalk, 30 years old, with a photograph in her pocket and a recording that had just broken open a billionaire's wedding and a daughter she hadn't held in 4 years, and she looked at that car. And waited. If this story hit something in you, if you know what it is to love somebody with everything you have and still lose, if you know what it is to keep walking when there is nothing left to walk toward, share this. Right now. With somebody who needs to know that the people this world overlooks are still watching, still moving, still carrying the truth. And if today is the day you found this channel, subscribe. Because we don't stop at the comfortable stories. We find the ones that cost something to tell. Like if Dorothy's courage reached you. Drop a comment and tell us what part of her story hit home. We read every single one. She's still walking. And we'll be here when the story continues.